This is Dan Abbott. I'm making this video for my class in SMCC, Southern Maine Community College, in AEDD 260. Some tips on efficiency in drawing with AutoCAD or AutoCAD type software. I'm going to start with a handout that has a series of drawing exercises that illustrate some of the efficiency issues. Go to AutoCAD now. We're going to look over here, and the thing I want you to look at is the fact that there is a repeatable pattern. Always, when using CAD software of any kind, look for repeatable patterns and take advantage of that. In this particular case, we've got two repeatable patterns. We've got these arcs that repeat. We've also got these tabs that repeat. It would be possible to draw these in such a way that you ended up doing 13 different exercises or operations. It's also possible to look at the repeatable pattern and recognize that it starts right there, comes to the end of the tab, goes through that arc, comes back and goes to the end of that arc and stops. So if I create just the repeatable pattern and then array it, it gives me a lot more control, and it's much easier to do the editing, and there's a lot less trimming to do as I go along. So what I'm going to do over here, start with a circle command. I'm going to draw a circle at 16, 13 because it tells me to do that. D for diameter because Autodesk made the mistake in the 80s of creating software that expects a circle to have a radius, not a diameter. So I have to type the D when I want to put in a diameter of 4. Enter @ symbol means I repeat the circle command and I repeat it at the same point that I just picked. That's the @ symbol. That means I have a concentric circle. I'm going to put a radius of 8. Enter @ symbol, enter. I'll do another circle that has a radius of 11 because that's what delineates the length of that tab. Now I'll draw a line also with the @ symbol because it starts in the same location. I'll just drag it out like that. Now I'm going to offset that line 0.5 because the width of that slot is 1, so if I offset 0.5 in each direction. Offset before trimming because if I trim this first it'll actually be too long. The other sides are getting shorter because of that arc. I'm going to erase that line. Now I'll do some trimming, and I'll just use all of those as my trim lines. Don't just press enter whenever you want to do a little trimming. Be selective because otherwise I would leave things behind that I wouldn't necessarily want to leave behind. I'm going to get rid of this and those. Then I'm going to erase that line because it was used only as a way of delineating the length. Now the arc command is often overlooked by people, partly because it's a little bit cumbersome. I'm going to use it in this case because it does have some advantages. Recognize that we're dealing with a Cartesian coordinate system so that angles are measured counterclockwise. So it asks for the start point of the arc. Don't pick the top, pick the bottom because the arc is going to go in this direction. I've also got a lot of things going on for acquiring points here. So I'm going to start by snapping to that end point. Now I need to make a change or an option because the second point of the arc means pick a point along the arc but not the end. The end of the arc I need to pick by going to the end option. Come up here and do that. Now my options are angle, direction, or radius. What I know is the radius. Pick radius type 2 because that's the radius given. Now I have the arc at the end of this drawn accurately. Now I'm going to rotate just that edge of the tab. And I'm going to rotate it around the center. But before I give it an angle of 15 degrees, I'm going to type C for copy. Then put the angle of 15, and the reason is I'd like to keep this whole tab intact. I'm going to use this line simply as a trim line so that I can get rid of that part of the arc. Now I need to erase this so I don't have lines on top of lines, but that is my repeatable pattern. Now that I've got the repeatable pattern, I have three choices for how to array it. One of them is the new-ish AutoCAD array command, which in my opinion was a really bad implementation of the command and replaced a much better command. So I'm not even going to deal with the new command. Instead I'm going to go to Array Classic. Classic has an advantage over the new one in that it's a dialog box based command that allows you to make some choices, and it has a preview option. So what I'm going to do is go in here. I'm going to select objects. The objects I select are going to be those objects right here. Goes back to the dialog box, allows me to pick the center. In this particular case, it knows I need a center because I've already selected polar array. Now, there are a couple things about this to note. Method, you can choose, depending on what you know about the array you're doing, the total number of items in the array and what the angle is you want to fill, the total number of items in the array and the angle between them. the angle to fill, and the angle between items. Any of those pieces of information. In this case, I know there are 13 of these and I want to fill an angle of 180. I'm putting a positive number in here because, again, it's Cartesian. Everything's going to go counterclockwise. If I wanted to go in the other direction, say I picked or I'd drawn the tab on the right first, I have to put a negative 180 in here to have it go that way. You'll also notice that there's something down here that says more, and the more allows you to change some things. In this case, there's nothing there we need to change, but we do want to rotate the items as they're copied, otherwise they would all be oriented the same way as the original one. Let's just say, though, I make a mistake on that, and I do this. And I come over here to OK, and I look at it, and it doesn't look right. I press Escape, and what did I not do? Well, I'm back. What it did when I cleared that is it did the array, but because it wasn't rotating them, it put all of them on top of each other. So the thing about the Array Classic, though, is when you do the OK, you look at it. If you don't like it, you press Escape, and you get the dialog box back. Now I can select Rotate Items as Copied, preview it one more time, and now when I preview it, you'll notice that it's exactly what I want. Press Enter, and it accepts it. Now I want that arc to come all the way over here. If I did this drawing correctly, I should be able to extend the arc so it goes over and hits that corner. Now I've got two other arrays here. One other array. I'm going to use the command line version of the array, the old-fashioned command line version. And to get that, I need to type a negative sign first. So I'm going to start by drawing a circle. I'm going to track off the center of this. But before I did that, I went in and I set my polar tracking angle to 15 degrees. And I also, under Track Settings, changed that so it tracks using all polar angle settings. By default, AutoCAD only tracks orthogonally. 0 and 90 degrees. I went to track using everything. I also went into my object snaps, running object snaps, and I added to my normal running object snaps of endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, and extension. I added quadrant because I want to be able to track off a quadrant in this. So now if I go back in the circle command, track off the center, go up at 45 degrees, and it reads that out. And I have 15 because 15 gives me 15, 30, 45, 60, and 75. So I want to put a circle there with a diameter of 2.125. Yeah. Enter gives me the circle command back. It just repeats my last command. The @ symbol selects the last point that I entered. If I type 2 now, it'll draw an arc with a radius of 2. And the same location. Now I'm going to trim. I'm going to trim using those two arcs. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of that. Now I'm going to use array. This time I'm going to type a negative array. Everything's at the command line. I'll select that. And by the way, you really need to understand the command line versions of commands because you're going to do some Autolist programming later in the semester, and the only way to use those commands in an Autolist program is to understand how they work from the command line. I'm done selecting objects. It's going to be a polar array, so I type P. The base of the array is going to be right here. There are 3 items. The angle to fill is 90 degrees. Enter, enter, and it comes around. Now I'm going to go and trim again, but again, don't just press the Enter key a second time to make every single line in the drawing a trim line. Be selective. That's a trim line. That's a trim line. Enter. I'm done. Now I can get this without leaving any artifacts behind that I'm not interested in having. I'm going to draw another circle. I'm going to track off the center and go straight down. 5 units. Diameter. I have to type D. 2.125 is the diameter of that. Last thing is to put in that keyway. Now I'm going to start by just drawing a line that goes just all the way up through as a center line. And I'm going to offset that for the keyway. Now this keyway width is 0.75. You know and I know that 0.75 divided by 2 is 0.325. So don't do that. Instead, even though this one actually is a simple one to do, when you go to the offset command, you can type an apostrophe, CAL, enter. That'll give you a transparent command. Apostrophe means transparent command. The calculator can be used while you're in another command. Now I type 0.75 divided by 2, and I don't need to worry that I make a mistake in doing the math. When I do that, it returns 0.375, but it also uses that with the command I'm in. So now I'm offsetting 0.375, so the actual width is going to be 7.75. I'll get rid of that center right there. I do need to know where the keyway stops. So I'm going to start, since keyways are always dimensioned from the back side of a hole to the bottom of the keyway, I'm going to hover over quadrant. Because I have it as a running object snap, I can acquire it. I'm going to go straight up 4.34, which is the depth of the keyway. Then I just drag it over till it hits the intersection. I'll use the extend command to extend it over. I could have just dragged it with a grip. And now I'll use trim again, pick those lines, get rid of those, get rid of those, get rid of those, and now I've got my keyway set. Oops, sorry about that. Now I have my keyway set. Now, one way to check to see if you've got drawings that are accurate in the sense that there are no gaps at the intersections, that there's no overlaps, is to join things into a P-line. I'm going to do that using the AutoCAD join command, and I'm just going to put a window around, or type all, everything that I've done and say join it all together if you can. If I come down here and hover over it, that now becomes one entity, that becomes one entity, and that gives me some reassurance that there are no gaps and no overlaps in any of the corners. Now let's talk about getting data out of the drawing. There are a number of ways you can get the area from this. I'm just going to go through all of them because you might have a preference one way or the other. One of them, now that everything is joined together as single objects, is for me to go to the area command, type A for add, O for object, and add into my calculations the entire thing. The green shading tells me that that's what I'm getting the area of. But what I want is the area of the whole thing minus the holes. So once I'm done selecting things to add, I press enter. Now I type S for subtract, O for object, and I can start picking individual things that I want to pull out of the area. There's a drawback to this technique, which is I can't use a window to collect those things. So if I've got a lot of them, I'm picking one at a time. When I press enter, it tells me the area is 232.2644. 232.2644 is answer D over here. And you notice that all of these questions have answers that vary only in the fourth decimal place. And I did that so that you would know instantly if you have made a mistake. If you get one of those values exactly, the chances of you having made an error in drawing this are very slim. If you can't get, or you're not close to one of those answers, you've made a mistake. Go back and see if you can find it. Now I'm going to hit escape. There are a couple of other ways in which you can determine an area. And the couple of other ways in which you can determine area include creating a single entity by using regions. Now there are two ways to do that. If I use the region command, and a region, if you're not familiar with it, is a two-dimensional 3D object. I can say convert all of those things into regions. Now that they're regions, I can use three-dimensional commands, all of the Boolean functions on it as though it's a 3D object, which it is, but it's a 3D object with a 0 thickness. Subtract is a Boolean function that allows me to say subtract from this big thing, enter, all these little things. And the beauty of this is I can use a window. So I could have 1,000 little holes in there, and instead of having to pick them 1,000 times, I put a window around. Now what it's done is converted this whole thing into a single entity, which is essentially a flat piece with holes through it. Now I type AA for object, AA for area, O for object, pick that object, and it tells me that the area is 232.2644. I could also turn this into a three-dimensional object by extruding it. I'm going to back up. When I back up, I'm going to go back to before I turned all these things into regions. So now they're individual polylines. Take a look, or individual entities. That's a circle. I hover over this one, that's a polyline. Another way that you can use regions for this purpose is to use the boundary command. The boundary command allows you to pick a point, and you have ray tracing that then traces whatever it is it hits and turns it into, well, that's not true, creates on top of the existing geometry either polylines or regions. Polylines are the default. Regions is what I'm going to use. I pick my point with island detection enhanced, enabled. Now if I hover over this, that is a region, that is a region, and every one of these circles is a region, but there's actually underneath it a polyline. Now I can do the same thing in terms of using the subtract command. I can start with subtract, pick the overall. Oop, that was stretch because I made a typing error. SU for subtract. Now I'm going to go to pick this, and when I do that, it pops up and says, well, what are you picking, a region or a polyline? Because selection cycling is turned on right now with my computer. Right now I have to go and pick region because there's a region with a polyline under it. Well, I know the region's on top, so I'm going to go down here to I have a tab that says selection cycling, and I'm going to turn it off. With the last reference to doing area, and that is that people can often get an accurate area by putting a hatch pattern in something and then checking the area of that object, which is the hatch pattern. In this case, it's 232.2644. I will caution you that several releases ago I discovered that the hatch area was not always accurate. It did not always conform to the areas that I achieved with the other two methods. So I'm no longer relying on a hatch pattern as an accurate way of getting an area from a complex shape. But in the last several releases, I've tried to find that same error and have not been able to. So I think that might have been a glitch that was corrected. I'm going to do one other of the drawings in that packet because it relates to this and is similar. So let's just go down and take a look at that. There are a few other types of things here, but the one I'm going to do right now is a ratchet, because it also illustrates the value of dealing with repeatable patterns. So I'll go ahead and erase what I've got here. And I'm now looking at this ratchet over here. And if I look at the ratchet, it's clearly got a repeatable pattern. And the repeatable pattern is that tooth right here. So if I can just create, I don't know, the pattern from here up to here, because that shows me that it's 90 degrees. If I can just put those two lines in the right place, I should be able to do an array and have that come out. So I'm back in AutoCAD. I'll do a circle just to give me something to keep track of, and that'll be that hole in the middle. The center is 6, 4.5. The diameter of that hole is 2. Bring that over and just come up a little bit. Now I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to draw a line from the center of the circle, and I'm going to have that thing come out half of 8.5. In other words, the diameter of an arc that comes around, I probably should have put a radius on that. But anyway, the diameter is 8.5, so 4.25. That's how far I want to come out. And that's going to give me the end of that line. So I've drawn basically a line going right out to that point right there. Now I'm going to do a rotate once again. Grab the line. Base point of the rotate is going to be here. I'm going to do a copy, and the angle to rotate it is 20 degrees. The reason is because I know if I draw a line from the end point of the line I first drew, shift or right click perpendicular to that line, that will duplicate that shape right over here. So now I can erase this. I'm going to trim this out. Now we'll go to the array command. We'll do array classic again because it's so visual. So I'll go to array classic again. I'll come over and select my objects. The objects I want to select are those objects right there. Dialog box pops back up. It is a polar array. I'll select the center point of the array, which is the center of that circle right there. In this case, okay, here's a case where what I know is the angle between them and the angle to fill. So I'll come down and say angle to fill. Angle to fill is 360 degrees. It goes all the way around. The angle between the items is 20 degrees. So instead of having to count those or doing a little bit of math, I can type that information that I have in. If I go, and I do want to rotate them as they're copied. If I do a preview now, it shows me that I have exactly what I want. I press enter, and now I'm done. A couple other things I'm going to point out. So let me continue. I won't do the entire drawing, but I'll do right over here. We have that little sort of hot dog looking thing, that shape right there to draw. And there are a couple ways that you can do that. One of them is to recognize the absolute angle. And if the absolute angle is used, 90 degrees to go straight up. 90 degrees plus 28 would be 118. So one way to draw that would be to say, I want to draw a circle. And now I'm going to do shift right click from and say I want to start this from, hang on just a minute, I just shifted this on the side. Didn't mean to. Okay, now we're back here. I'm going to draw a circle from the center of this, and I'm going to go at the radius, which is 3, at an angle of 90 plus 228, which is 118 degrees. Now the diameter or the radius, what do I know? I know the radius of that is 0.25, so I'm going to put in a 0.25. Now I can do a rotate, my last object. Base point is going to be here. We're going to copy that and rotate it 34 degrees. Now I can draw a circle. Circle can start here. And let's shift right click and pick tangent and say draw a circle as tangent to the bottom of that circle. I can do the same thing again and have it tangent to the top, or I can offset it. Since I know the radius, I can offset it the diameter, which is 0.5. Bring that up, and now those two circles are tangent. I can go in now and just say let's clean this up. Not that. Let's clean this up. So I get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of that, and get rid of that. And now I have the part that I can, I'm going to mirror it actually. But I'll show you one other thing. If you just don't feel like, or if you got a situation where adding the angles to get an absolute angle doesn't work for you, what I could have done is said, listen, I'm going to just draw a circle 3 units straight up that has a diameter of 0.5. And now I'm going to just rotate that circle. Since I know the angle to rotate it at, but I don't feel like doing the math, don't copy it this time, just rotate it 28 degrees. Now it's in the right place. Now I can rotate that. Now I can rotate that circle. This time I'm going to use a base point here, but I'm going to use a copy, and when I rotate it 34 degrees with a copy, I get the two circles in there. Once again, I'll use the tangent option to go right up to here. I'll offset that 0.5 again, bring it up here. Now when I zoom in, do a little bit of trimming, I get rid of that, that, and that. Now I'm going to use the mirror command. And the mirror command, I'm going to go ahead and grab all these things. And you'll notice that I don't really want to grab all those things. I could turn this into something solid. But I also, don't forget, have the option when I'm picking something of dragging around, not picking and letting go, but lassoing that so it doesn't get more than I want. Now my first mirror line is here. I go straight up and it does that. I'll go ahead and put a hole for that top part by projecting or tracking off of this up 3, and that hole is a diameter of 1. Now I use the mirror command again, and once again I'm going to use the lasso option so that I don't get more than I really want. Now I get all the things that I need there. Come to the center, pick a point, just drag it straight over and press enter. Now I won't bother to go through and draw the keyway in, you know how to do that. But again, the join command now allows me to put everything together so it's much easier to deal with. So when I am dealing with areas, I have all these parts now completely joined. And again, I can either use the area command with the add and subtract options, or I could use the boundary command, which would be my preference. Make regions out of it, pick a point on the inside, press enter, say I want to subtract from this large item. Again, I need to turn off my object cycling. I can subtract from the large object, put a window around everything, all the small objects. You'll notice I now have a single region that's all put together. Then I go area, object, and pick it. Now that's not the correct area because I didn't put the keyway in here. But that's how you do it. I'm going to end this video and I'll make another one that has some of the other items that you can be dealing with.